So I'll admit I'm a little obsessed with building this very clean and functional interior. One problem I often run into are I really like these strip lights that make a lot of light, but I don't necessarily like to see them directly. This week, one thing I'm working on is using trim to strategically hide some of these strip lights that I find extremely useful. And then later in the episode, we are getting into some serious electrical work. One problem that's coming up, I think, on a lot of boats are people are putting in higher voltage battery banks, like a 48 volt, like what we have, but they also have all of these instruments on board that are using 24 volts. The capacity of that 24 volt system has to be met by some kind of converter, which will change that 48 volts into 24 volts. And we found a solution to this, which I'm really excited about. And so we're going to get into installing that piece of equipment this week. We've been working on lights a lot lately, and one of the next projects is to make sure that the galley has lots of good lighting. I installed these two, well, there were two lights up here highlighting this section of the counter. There's going to be a huge light in the overhead that highlights above the sink. One of the problems has been, how do we highlight this area of the counter without, building some kind of crazy contraptions that hold lights up. And so what I decided a long time ago was to do a long strip light along here, and I want to hide it. So my mom and I have been experimenting and designing this piece of trim that's going to go along the underside of the side deck here. We were just playing with how the light's going to look. Now, this is not the actual light. This one's actually a lot dimmer. Uh-oh. Oh, there it goes. And so this is the light. Well, like I said, the real light will be much brighter. This is 60 lights per meter. The one we're getting is 240 lights per meter, all from Imtra. And so I think it's going to be a really nice bright light over the stove and a lot of the counter. So today, the rest of the day, my mom and I are going to be installing some more trim, and it'll be like for the purpose of hiding these lights. Now we've got this piece of trim right where we want it. It's taped up. And so I'm going to go around and mark the inside edge and the outside edge so that we can mask it after we take it down and know where to sand. And then we can pre-drill all the holes that we're going to use to fasten it up to the deck. And so, yeah, like I said, first we're going to mark it up. Okay. Is that straight up and down, Yanni? The drill?
No, go a little bit towards you. There.
We sanded down some of the Meranti to make a small pile of sawdust that I can mix in with the epoxy to give it a similar color to my trim. There will be some gaps between the somewhat lumpy overhead and the trim, and instead of them being filled with epoxy-colored epoxy, I'd prefer if the glue is a similar color to the trim.
Start from the middle and maybe work your way this way, just putting a bead on top. I'm going to need to make more, I can already tell. So since that end is all pretty tight up against the overhead,
Yeah.
I don't think we need any
At all?
wood dust in it. Yeah. To the end, just put a big bead on top.
What about the holes? Do I avoid
Nothing
those?
different. Yeah.
Just go right over them?
Yep. You ready? So we'll definitely need another one right here. All right, so we just got to clean this up, all the epoxy. We'll pull the masking off and then take all the screws out tomorrow once the glue is cured. And then tomorrow I could start building the one on the other side as well. And obviously later we'll do some varnishing. There's a whole bunch more trim to go around the boat, so all that will get varnished at the same time.
The next day, I installed trim on the port side, which mirrors the starboard side. Again, I'm planning on this piece to conceal another light strip, but just over the nav station.
So today is a really fun project. I get to basically attach the power that will go from the 48 volt bank to the 24 volt bank, and then we'll power all of these circuits that I installed a few weeks ago.
Mike made these little gluable studs that I can insert 1/4-20 hex heads into. I used my MMA glue on the stud and the boat to make a solid mounting system with studs for panels like these.
It's interesting because I'm using some new equipment and kind of designing my own individual circuits here to make this thing work with all the proper fusing and switching that's going to occur. And it's also a lot bigger wires. This one isn't that big, but it's more akin to battery cables that I'm making to attach all these things together. So I'll get into the details as we go through this, and hopefully I'll get done with this today. This is a pretty quick project, I'm hoping. A lot of my cable runs have gotten really tight as I put more and more cables through these runs, and it's harder to shove a wire through these spaces. And one trick I've learned in the past is to use a piece of PEX, which is pretty stiff, but still a little bit flexible. And I basically use it like as a syringe. So my piece of PEX gets pushed up through the wire run. Then I can take my cable, I've already made up one end with the lug on it, and then I can just push it through the PEX. Once that's through, I can just pull the PEX off and my cables run. I think it's pretty cool. Now what I'm doing is, like I said, I'm taking the power from the battery and from the charger that's going to be powering the 24-volt circuit and distributing it into all the switches for like all the utilities on board. And I'm actually dividing it into two big circuits. One is all the bilge pumps, and then one is everything else. And that's because I want the bilge pumps to basically be permanently connected to the battery, obviously fused, but I don't want those to be able to be switched off with a big switch, like a main switch. And so those are permanently connected to the battery. Everything else I can turn off one switch and it will turn everything off. All right, so I'm now making the negative cables that go from the panel back to the battery and the charger. Okay, I'm connecting the red positive cord from the battery now to the bus bar. So these are the ANL fuses. These are pretty cool. So, or this is the fuse holder. This is the fuse. It's really simple. It just slips onto this post and then your terminal goes on top. They're very, very cool. I've never used these before, but Mike turned me on to them. So we're going to be using this to go from the bus bar on the positive side to the battery to protect that wire that's going from the battery to the bus bar. All right, the last part here is to make the yellow cable or the negative cable that goes from the battery to the other side of, this is the shunt. So this is what's going to measure how many amps are going into and out of the battery, as well as measuring the voltage and all that stuff. That's a Victron product. Very good. Obviously there's a bunch of cleaning up to do here. I got to organize my cables. This is also just a dummy battery. There's nothing inside it. And Solid State Marine sent me this so I could do just this, make sure all my cables are the right lengths and everything. So it's, when the real one comes, it's ready to be installed. So yeah, for now, that's it as far as getting this 48 to 24 volt circuit together. All right, so I've cleaned this wire project up a bit and I want to give you a little tour. All right, so the purpose of this project again was to wire in all the equipment that will take 48 volts, which is our main battery bank, and convert it to 24 volts and distribute it into the 24 volt panel, which is all of our house loads, everything from lights to pumps to refrigeration, etc. And so this has to be a very robust system because we are relying on a lot of those systems for navigation and keeping the boat dry and our food cold, all that stuff. So it's a very, very important system to get right, be very maintainable, easy to visualize and see any problems that are occurring. So I'm lucky enough to have lots of space here to, have everything be very easily seen. Now again, this Links distribution center from the Victron made, this is our 48 volt secondary distribution. What we're doing is tapping off from this thing and going to this unit. This is called a DC to DC converter. I'm sure a lot of you know and use these things on your boats. The difference with this one is that it can charge at 3 kilowatts. One of the biggest challenges that we've had with designing this system is doing this, is changing 48 to 24 volts, but doing it at a really high capacity. And this company, Safieri, is the only one that we've found that makes a marinized version at this high capacity. It's a very, very, very cool unit, and it's called a Scotty. But again, it changes 48 to 24 volts, and it actually goes in reverse too, from 24 to 48 volts. And it's Wi-Fi enabled, and so I can monitor and control it from my phone. And like I said, 3 kilowatts. And so it will power the entire panel and not be at full capacity. So it's a very powerful unit. If I were to do this with Victron DC to DC converters, I would need like 10 of them in parallel in order to do the same thing. So it's a very cool unit. It not only powers the panel, but it also charges the 24 volt battery bank, which is just this battery right here, the Solid State Marine battery. What it's doing is doing both at the same time. It's charging keeping the battery topped off all the time, as well as powering the 24 volt circuits. From there, it's basically just distribution. And so, like I said before, I have 2 feeders that are going from this bus bar. One is just for bilge pumps, and that is unswitched, and so it is always on. And the other has a big switch in it, and that is powering everything else. And so I can, with just one button, turn off that entire panel. But I don't want to be able to do that with the bilge pumps. I want them always running, or always have power to them. That's basically it. There is a shunt in there for monitoring how much is going into and out of the battery, just for monitoring purposes. And then there's a bunch of fuses. All of these big cables need to be protected, and we do that by using these fuses. I can hear Franz, our very loyal Patreon, in the comments asking, Matt, isn't this Safieri, this DC to DC converter, a single choke point, a single point of failure that would render the 24 volt circuits useless if it goes down? And it's a very good question. If this thing does go down, I only have one. I'm not gonna have a backup. They're pricey units, but I will have other means of charging the 24 volt battery bank. And one is an alternator off of the generator, and the other will be solar that we can switch over to charging that bank if we need to. So Yeah. Thank you for the question, Franz. I know it's coming. I sent pictures to Mike. He said thumbs up, so I'm ready to move on to the next project.
Thanks for watching, folks. Next week, we're going to reveal the color that we will be painting the exterior of Duracell. It's not going to be white, and, well, you'll just have to wait to see if it will be maybe hot pink.